What's up, everybody? I want to welcome you to another episode of The Hot Seat with PeeJae Fuego. I'm a modern-day Maya Angelou, dressing like Kanye West and speaking like Malcolm X, everybody. And if you're anything like me, you may have a little, anxiety when it comes to dating, a little PTSD from certain relationships, or even you just find yourself getting nervous meeting new people, if you're anything like me. But my people, today we're gonna hash out all those topics, all those said categories and everything. Before we do that, make sure you're following us on all of our social media platforms. That's PeeJae Fuego. In the hot seat today, we have therapist, life, and relationship coach Harrison Thompson. Everybody.
Hey, what's up? What's up?
Hey, this is where you had the whoo.
Yeah, I like that intro, but you fire, man. You fire.
Man, thank you, man. How you doing?
I'm good, bro. Trying my best to, I guess, do what it is I need to do for the day and for the day only. I got this bad habit of getting so caught up in my head sometimes. My focus has to be on presence, bro. So once I'm doing that, I'm Gucci.
No, I can attest to this, everybody. Let me tell you how I've been trying to schedule Mr. Thompson here, and it's almost like pulling teeth. Not quite pulling teeth, but it's almost like pulling teeth. So I'm happy to sneak him in the hot seat today to give us our a clarity on that mental health aspect. And the topic today we're tackling is dating and the side effects it has on mental health. And who better, my goodness, to have in the seat today? So let's get to it.
Humble.
Harrison, I know on the previous episode that we did last week, we spoke about pandemic relationships. Have you seen any, increase in more so therapy sessions or relationship sessions when it comes to, persons that might have met during the pandemic or even throughout the pandemic in general?
Yeah, I definitely think that the pandemic has made people open up a little bit more to the value of therapy, not necessarily as a reactional thing, but literally as a decision for people who want to get a better grip on their lives and their relationships. And of course, with the pandemic coming up and, lockdowns, increased restrictions, it has really kind of changed the way that human beings relate and connect with one another. And so people are trying to figure out, how do I navigate this space? How do I maintain my confidence? How do I reintegrate into socializing properly? There are so many different things that I'm so happy people are beginning to acknowledge in their own lives. And I think just overall, it has actually enhanced their dating and relationship experience during this pandemic.
Okay, I think it's so crazy because it makes you then think of different ideologies when people think of the importance of mental health and the importance of mental health in relationships. Talk to me a little bit. How important is therapy, even if it's pre-relationship, during the relationship, post-relationship?
Yeah, so, I always believe that now is a great time for therapy. I don't think that therapy should only be considered when we're losing control or when we're lost. I think therapy can also be a very good supplement to kind of maybe explore some ideas that maybe we've never considered before, or maybe seeing from a third, unbiased, protected perspective that, listen, there's some things that are happening outside the awareness of my own emotionality that could really benefit me if I just decide to pay attention to them. And, the human bias says that once I feel I'm okay, therefore I'm good. But therapy really kind of challenges that notion to say, even though you're feeling okay, are there other things that you can be improving on, other things that you can begin considering? And I find that when people are able to do that with an open mind, they become a version of themselves that they didn't even realize they needed to be. So it's definitely always a plus.
I definitely agree with that and can attest to that. I want to say that when I first initially got introduced to therapy and thinking of the ideology of even going to therapy or sitting down, it's one of those things like, I'm going to go talk my business to this therapist or this boy you don't even know me type thing. And it's sometimes you have to get out of your own head. Because whereas I always say when people feel down or depressed or any aspect that's opposite than positive, I always say that you have to give yourself a pep talk before you go looking for a pep talk. It's more so putting yourself in the head space to say, hey, you might hear this or you might... that the world may not agree with everything that you do, and it's kind of like you need a third-party sense of advice to chime in. And even when it comes to dating, I think for me, a lot of folks, and me and my producer were just having an off-air conversation about this. A lot of folks come from this idea of, I don't know if this is my word, I made it up, but I want to trademark it, relationship PTSD.
Okay.
I want to know if that's really a thing, or it could be relationship anxiety, either one, however you want to place it, but I want to trademark it as relationship PTSD. Being like finding yourself scared to step into another relationship, or even the sense of fearful, you get anxious, you're getting nervous, you find yourself even trying to, like, panic attacks, thinking of going into this relationship. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so you're spot on. You may have a little bit of a fight trying to trademark that, because in our realm we do have some things that have been clinically acknowledged as relationship PTSD. So I mean, you can try. Go for it, bro. Go for it, bro. You may win that. I don't know.
No. Instead of trademarking it, now you can become a doctor.
Man, like, yeah, the world is your oyster, bro. But it's a real thing, because you think about it, right? Life for everybody kind of starts with our experiences, right? The reason why we think and do what we do is either validated by our experience or it's challenged by our experience, right? If you had a bad first impression of Harrison, then that becomes the foundation that you judge the other experiences with me on. Whereas if you had a great first experience with Harrison, that becomes the foundation that you judge additional experiences with me on.
Yeah.
So when you think about going through betrayal or getting cheated on or being gaslit or just going through some form of abuse in that relationship, you better believe that who you come out on the other side of, that you're not going to be the same person, right?
Right.
And I think people really need to spend some time trying to figure out, how has that hurt affected me? How has that hurt changed me? Because if you don't deal with that PTSD, then you're going to move prematurely into other relationships trying to avoid those very same triggers. And that just may not be a good situation for both of you.
Well, I can definitely say that I think that I had a little PTSD, so I'm slowly recovering. I found myself if I was being transparent, in a little situation back in 2018, I think, 2018, 2019, where I came back home. I'm thinking when you find yourself dating for X amount of times, you find yourself a little bit thinking that you have a little bit more experience. So you go into different situations, trying to wield that experience. And I got into a new dynamic with somebody that I hadn't been into with prior to. That's a little phrase. So it made me, I guess, realize and recollect on a plethora of things. And when I found myself lost in the middle of the relationship or situationship, really, because it was one of those things where I didn't realize I lost my power until I called for my power.
Wow.
And I want to say, like, yeah, you be cool, like, you got it. And when I realized that I was in so deep, like, it was way too late. It was way too late. And at that point, the person was gaslighting, like you mentioned. Not physically at all abusive, but just more emotionally abusive in the aspect of being very nonchalant, or even, I guess, kind of dismissive.
Yeah.
And all those things, like, they played a role in that sense of opening back up or going to someone new and trying to be that. So that's why I feel like a lot of savages and these city boys and city girls are coming out of nowhere, because it's like you're emulating the hurt that you experienced. So now you're out here thinking that's a definition, or that's a definitive of how dating is in insert country, insert area, insert subculture here. So it makes you kind of, I guess, I don't know, makes me kind of wary about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think as it should, right? Because there's always going to be these opportunities where it's like, I am taking a risk on something that I already feel, something that I believe is worthwhile, but there's never going to be quite enough information to relieve you of that fear that I may get hurt. And that is because you will oftentimes feel love before you're ready for the commitment aspect of what a relationship is. Which is why a lot of people default to situationships, right? Because situationships,
right, like,
they allow us to kind of participate in the good feelings without the burden of being responsible, right?
Yeah.
You feel like once I can kind of release my burden of having to be responsible, I can participate in these feelings without necessarily having to be responsible or without having to manage my own emotionality. And so you got to be so careful about getting into situations prematurely, because Lord knows it's very easy to get into a relationship or a situation, but it's much harder to deal with the emotions that are now brought up or triggered as a result of that. So we definitely got to move differently.
How do you feel about the statement of saying that you yourself can be someone's half? You're half to a whole. How do you feel about the statement like that?
You could be, right? Now, the question is it sustainable? Because when you're a half to a whole, you really kind of have to be something for that other half to work efficiently.
Yeah.
Right? You know, like a car can't operate on 3 tires, or if there's 2 keys that's needed for this particular lock, I can't get in even though I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing.
Right.
So I think it's very romantic to say that, you know, you're my other half. But when we think psychologically, that's very risky. You don't want your happiness and your peace to be dependent on who a person is on any particular day, right? That's just too risky. You want to make sure that you are able to make yourself happy, that you are able to be your own peace, that you are able to be secure within yourself, so that whatever the relationship is asking you, you can kind of fill that order. But when you need a person to kind of be something for you, you're moving into an abstract area that you can no longer manage or control. Your risk for getting hurt goes all the way up, and it may not necessarily be something you can recover from. So you got to be mindful about those types of romantic gestures and statements, for sure.
My people, you heard it here. We have Harrison Thompson to confirm what I've always been saying. I have this theory, not even theory, but my feelings on that statement is just more of a, you have to be your own whole before you're even someone's half. How am I going to pour into your cup and I'm pouring all of me out?
It don't work.
It don't work. So at the end of the day, when it's kind of like, you look at certain situations, or even insert your parents or grandparents relationship here, who've been dating for about however amount of years, and you have this idea that they met at, let's say, an early age, let's say 16, 17,
right.
And you go on this idea that goes on where they've been married for so many years, your grandmother had so-and-so children, but then you also have that small fact, and it doesn't be everybody, but you have the small fact where they talk about the bad side, like, oh, well, he had, you see, you have other aunties and uncles about the same age as your own mom and dad, but outside marriage. And it's like, oh, well, he never treated me bad. Right, sorry, I was thinking too much. But he never treated me bad, he never do this. And it's like, it comes across as settling. It comes across as an escape to say, to not be accountable, to avoid the accountability of this mistake or this problem or this hindrance to our relationship, to our romantic relationship at that. So I when I hear a person's ideology when it comes to dating and marriage, it makes me kind of nervous. Yeah. And it brings me to my point here. I saw you post on Facebook, I think it was the other day. I think I have it written down here. I was trying to go off the top of my head, but anxious preoccupied attachment versus dismissive avoidance attachment. Am I saying that right?
Yes, you got it.
Okay. Can we elaborate a little bit more on that? I know you went into a whole spiel on Facebook, but I want us to talk about it for a little bit.
Yeah, man. So that anxious preoccupied attachment, what I didn't say on that post, right? It's developed in childhood when children receive unpredictable love, or it's developed in relationships when you received unpredictable love. When we think about unpredictability, it leaves you on the edge of your seat wondering what's going to happen next, right? If I say, PeeJae, I'm about to punch you, but then I don't punch you, you can't take your eyes off of me because you feel like the minute you take your eyes off of me, that's when I'm going to hit you. The same thing happens emotionally. It's like, if I tell you that I'm going to love you, but the last exchange that I've had with you was more like abuse, I'm now wondering what I'm going to get. It creates this preoccupation where it's like I'm constantly worried about the status of my relationships, and I'm constantly worried anxiously about what the future is going to bring. The catch-22 there is that even though you're thinking about the future, you have very little power and control over it. And so even though you are thinking about likely outcomes, the reality of you being able to control those things is just not real. The dismissive avoidant attachment is what happens when, in childhood, we have certain needs met and other needs completely neglected. But the problem there is that we just don't know that that's the case, and so we find that out the hard way by putting our emotions on the line. So it's like on Monday, I try to figure out, hey, what's going to happen? You tell me you're tired. Okay. On Tuesday, I come back and I said, hey, can we have that conversation again? And you say, you're busy. On the third day, I come back, but before I even ask, I say, you know what? never mind. Because now I get to the point where I do not believe that you can fulfill on the needs that I have. And so that translates into life, where you start dismissing the value of people in your life, because in your own life, people who are supposed to be responsible for meeting your needs weren't. And so we take on this idea now where we have to be completely responsible with money and outcomes, and it's like we try to be an island unto ourselves. But the problem is, we want a love that opens us up to the fact that we're going to lose control the deeper into love we go. And so it's a very ambivalent place to be, where it's kind of like the thing you want is also the very same thing you're afraid of. It can be very, very messy, bro.
Boy, I feel like you was talking to me just now. I'm like, Rylan, like, I don't want to get hurt no more. So I'm like,
it's like,
so I'm trying to like watch all those things. No, I totally agree, and I think that's an interesting point to take up on, because I never looked at it like that. I never looked at it in those aspects of attachment. I have already anxious, preoccupied attachment, and dismissive avoidance attachment. And I think it's with the knowledge of us having these conversations and bringing up this aspect of what mental health is now. So I definitely applaud it, and definitely it's like each one teach one. We have to educate our brothers and sisters. It's one of those things, like, you don't notice that certain things are a mental deficit or even a mental illness unless someone points it out to you. Because whereas if you think of it as normal or normality to you, it's like, okay, like, no. Once again, me and my producer having on a prior conversation, and we mentioned the idea of people have innate or may have an embedded mental health illness that they may not even know until they reach new dynamics, like a relationship or a partner or even marriage. It's one of those things, like, where that person gives you what you've been lacking, or gives you something that you might not have had before. So it makes you notice how you usually do react when you don't get this, or when you do get certain things, you know?
Yeah, I'm thinking that even to that particular point, maybe what relationships are doing then is they're simply revealing parts of ourselves that we have never actually addressed. Because when you think about being single, right, PeeJae, you don't really have to answer to anybody if you don't want to.
Right.
You don't have to be inconvenienced by things if you don't want to. You can, by and large, create a life that keeps you very safe. It's only when you start engaging with another person and feelings get involved, where it's like, I can't easily remove myself from this situation now. Is that really a problem with that person? Or is this person showing you a problem that you've always had? You've just never dealt with it. I think it really does require a mature perspective, so that instead of trying to feel better about what we're seeing, it can be an opportunity for us to actually be better instead.
I do want to bring up this topic. It was on Twitter the other day, and the folks were talking about my young female friend who got a spreadsheet out with the budgeting aspect of taking a boyfriend out or taking a boyfriend away, whatever have you. When it comes to relationships, I feel like in our day and age of dating, and the idea of dating being so skewed, so now when we do find ourselves transversing it, it's like, okay, we almost come from a sense of a fantasy idea of what's being portrayed to us when we see it on, like, media, or we see our friends in these perfect relationships, and we're saying, like, okay, it's my turn now, or, you know, this is what I'm going to do. So when it comes to, I guess, the post aspect of relationships, the breakup part of it, I want to say how important or how critical is your mental health thing, because I feel like you're at such a vulnerable point of mixing that physicality and your emotional aspect, and trying to, like, merge those together, trying to get somebody off of your skin, out of your system, or even having to deal with, like, betrayal or blatant betrayal, disrespectful betrayal that'll have your windshields broken out with a spark shot.
Yeah, no, you're right though, because it's like, when you think about what these things feel like, right? Especially if you've been there before, you know how intense and how consuming the feeling of anger is, or the feeling of sadness and depression is, or the feeling of hopelessness, and just the reality that maybe what you wanted to have happen isn't what's going to happen now. That can bring you to a place where you're not even familiar with yourself, where it's like you see yourself saying and doing things that you never thought you'd do before. But this is why I often ask people, if they come to me before they get into a relationship, or I propose the question, you will know that you're ready for a relationship when you become okay with getting hurt to a degree, and you become okay with inconvenience, right? And I say this because in this day and age, right, everybody is so focused on the vibe. If the vibe ain't good, I'm not staying around. Everybody is overly focused on happiness. If I'm not happy, I'm not staying around. But just because you don't have those particular emotions, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're in the wrong place. It just simply means that you have come to a point in which you need to work through certain challenges to get back to those particular feelings.
Boy, Harrison, you gotta know, if the vibes ain't right, I bounce in no time. Like, I have to go.
Dismissive avoidant.
Yeah, no, that avoidance. But also, if we want to like simplify this a little bit from those of us who may not be on those levels, that's an aspect of ghosting, and not that I'm proud of it, but and I've had it done to me before, and I've also done it once or twice. Sorry, two people, and it's one of those things that you consciously have to worry about how that takes a toll on folks. I honestly didn't realize how much of an impact it can have on somebody, especially where they are how they emotionally feel for you. I never realized how much of an impact that can have on somebody until it's actually done on me. And mind you, it was one of those things like if I didn't see us going, if I was at 1 and 2 and I couldn't see 3, then don't worry about it. If I was already giving you 4 or 5s and you're still stuck on 2, don't worry about it. It was one of those things like to me it felt as though it was a reflex, a response to the sense of trauma. Am I saying the reverse?
Very accurate, bro. Very accurate.
Yeah, so it's one of those things like you kind of realize how that can be a response mechanism, and an unhealthy one at that. And so it took some time for me to actually say, okay, PeeJae, take a step back, because it doesn't make sense that we're actually going out there, we're meeting potential people, entertaining people, to then just like one wrong move and it's done. It's a wrap.
Yeah, I think that that's a very natural occurrence, right? Nobody wants to feel bad. Nobody wants to hurt. Nobody wants to be in pain unnecessarily. And so it's like at the onset of a threatening feeling or situation, I think it's very natural that we would want to flee, that we wouldn't want to be around to kind of deal with that. And so it's like nowadays we're so hypersensitive to that. Any indication that that's where this relationship is heading, deuces, you know? It's like I'd rather deal with the hurt now by removing myself than to have to deal with a complete meltdown later. And so it's like, I get it, but we cannot always think that just because this is what we're feeling, that we have to give authority to that, right? Because if we keep on trying to feel better, that's going to cost us actually being better. And being better is all about delaying certain feelings because you realize that the reward is much greater than it would be now. And I think because we've been fighting for like feeling better for so long, or we've been in toxic situations for so long, I get it. It's like nowadays, I just want to feel better. I want a situation that I don't always have to work tooth and nail for. I want a situation where understanding is like prevalent and I don't have to earn that. I get that totally. But we got to realize that the culture now is that we have so many people who are trying to recover from broken situations. Everybody is kind of becoming very tribalistic now, where it's like, if you don't immediately present to me that you can make me happy and that you're not going to be a threat, I want nothing to do with it. But it just does not resolve this idea or this feeling that we still want love, we still want companionship, and we still want closeness. That's how we end up with the situationships that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
So you spot on, bro.
You know, I have this theory of getting ahead of the psych. That's what I call it. It's one of those things, if you present yourself that you want to, if you want to establish a romantic relationship with somebody, you have to get ahead of the psych first, because if the psych gets ahead of you, it is you hurt, it is you left behind, it is you. I can trademark that, right? I can trademark that.
You can trademark that. I ain't that one yet.
So, because it's one of those things, and I use the Bahamian colloquialism, Bahamian terms, because it's like you can't psych a G, you can't psych a G. So it's one of those things like when you put yourself out there, and you put yourself emotionally out there, it's like you said, a vulnerable state. So like even if you said that you open yourself up to hurt, or you open yourself up to the dismissive aspect of it, and you're actually actively trying to say, you know, give it a go. But if this person is trying to city girl me or hot boy me or whatever,
out. Because it's like you playing mental chess. It's like,
yes,
I see your move, and my response to your move is to make this move. And it's like,
Yes.
now what? It's like the longer we play the game, the harder it becomes to fulfill what long-term relationships are asking. In that order, that long-term relationships are asking us to fulfill is transparency and vulnerability. You can't have a long-term relationship without those two qualities being present.
Yeah.
So it's like, I like the idea of being in a relationship with you. I like the feeling of being in a relationship with you. But what I don't like about being with you is how you're showing me my own insecurities. It's like people want to believe that they are as strong as they think they are. People want to believe that they are as competent as they think they are. And so when situations threaten that idea, we assign that threat to the person, and then we want to leave the person, right? But maturity is recognizing that that's not something I can assign to a person. That's something that I need to assign to my own journey and my own growth. I need to embrace that challenge so that I can be better than I was yesterday, instead of just trying to feel better about something I think I can't change. Big difference.
No, I love that. I so love this conversation. Before we even go, everybody, Harrison, Thompson, while I have you here, I gotta hit you in the hot seat, okay, real quick. We're gonna do our first fly questions. We're gonna answer them quick, fast, and in a hurry. We're gonna do like 10 questions, so let's feel it out.
All right.
Let's feel it out and go. So, as a relationship life therapist, I want to get your advice on certain aspects of it, or certain relationships, or certain questions that venture into the aspect of relationships. So, do you believe in love languages?
Yes, I do. I'm a firm believer.
What's the most popular love language?
Words of affirmation and then physical touch.
What? Is that spending money? Third question. How should someone deal with a breakup?
They need to feel. Trying not to feel will cause the feelings to last longer. By allowing yourself to feel the discomfort of hurt and pain, the feelings actually want to leave you. So the more you feel, the less you feel. The less you try to feel, the more you feel.
Wow. I can leave me feeling spark plugs in my hand and throwing them through the windshield. Now, also, we didn't get a chance to talk about, give us your 6 ways to hurt yourself in a relationship. The self-sabotage. I also want to talk about that real quick. If you can list them for us. What are 6 ways that can hurt themselves in a relationship?
Yeah, so I think that was a tweet. I was kind of talking off the top, and I was showing people how, number one, when you begin expecting yourself from other people, you can really damage yourself, because you're literally 1 out of 1, right? There's nothing else like you in the world that will ever exist or that has already existed. So terrible thing. Number 2, don't believe that just because you got love that you are safe from the challenges of what relationships entail, right? Just because you have love, that doesn't mean you have knowledge on how to make a relationship work. We have to differentiate between those 2 things, right? Number 3, don't think that just because you're not arguing or that there hasn't been conflict that everything is okay. No. Sometimes you need to have short-term confrontation to have long-term peace. We have to stop dealing with problems as a reaction, and we have to start dealing with problems as a choice. When we can have conflict on our terms, it becomes easier to actually traverse that environment, getting back to a solution. Don't think that just because you have chemistry that means that you won't have bad days, right? I think a lot of times we think that because we have attraction and chemistry and because we're good friends, that somehow means we're going to avoid problems. No way. As long as you are your own thinking free individual, you will have challenge. Don't run away from the challenges, but use those challenges as an opportunity to deepen your communication. And I think maybe the last thing here is we need to recognize that there are going to be good and bad days in relationships. Finding the right person does not simply mean that you're going to have great days all the time. Even when you find the heart that is right for you, you're going to still have to work through the hard process of dealing with conflict, dealing with emotionality, and dealing with personalities. Once we can manage those things, man, PeeJae, I believe that relationships can begin improving.
Listen, my last hot fly question, I haven't found a proper name for this yet, but I'm working on it. What are some mental flags to look out for when trying to date?
Yeah, so number 1, and I see this all the time, mistaking lust for love, right? Don't think that just because you're getting all of this attention and this person is keeping you hot that they love you. Maybe they just love something about you. Okay, you got to be very careful over that. The second thing, don't think that possessiveness and jealousy translates into care. It does not. Just because a person is very possessive and just because they get very reactional to things that they don't like, that doesn't mean that they necessarily care about you. We got to watch out for that. Number 3, though, the most elusive thing. Narcissism is very charming in the beginning. Okay? Narcissism oftentimes looks like assertion. Narcissism oftentimes looks like confidence. Narcissism oftentimes looks like a person who has their head on right. And sometimes when you see that, it can be very enthralling to say that, man, I found someone who's really good. But you got to pace yourself, right? Don't allow yourself to tap fully into those feelings. Lead with your head before you lead with your heart. Give that person enough time, and they will eventually show you that their confidence was actually arrogance. They will actually begin showing you that their attention to detail was possessiveness and not necessarily care. I see so many people who get involved with narcissists because they simply don't know how to read the signs in the right way. And that's because, PeeJae, they're hungry. If you want to make sure overall, if you want to make sure that you're protecting yourself in this dating game, make sure you fulfill your needs first before you ever think about stepping foot in this dating pool. Because if you can't meet your own needs, you don't need to be in that dating pool to begin with.
And on that note, everybody, Harrison, I'm going to drop the mic on that. Harrison Thompson, therapist, life and relationship coach. How can people follow you? How can they keep up with you? If they want their own therapy session, how can they keep up with you? Tell us, drop them handles first.
Yeah, man. So I guess you can say my base of operations is on Facebook. So if you're ever on Facebook, you can find me at Harrison Thompson Official. That's the therapist page. That's the front line. If you're on Instagram, you can hit me up at HT4Real. That's the number 4 Real. If you want direct access to the office and sessions, you can call me at 356-7983 or 4. Or you can go on my website, www.harrisonhelps.com. You can fill a contact form submission page, and that'll come straight to my email address. We can work that into our systems and office, and we'll have a manager reach out to you to get your times booked and good to go.
My people, it's been modern day Maya Angelou, dressing like Kanye West and speaking like Malcolm X, everybody. Thank you once again for following us and watching another episode of The Hot Seat of PeeJae Fuego. Be sure to follow us on all our social media platforms. That's PeeJae Fuego. And until the next time, everybody.